It was the kind of town where everyone knew each other's dog's name, but not always their neighbor's first name. Willow Creek was small, charmingly so, but like any little town nestled between rolling farmland and the edge of suburban sprawl, it had its own demons. Some of them wore pearls and designer sunglasses, drove luxury SUVs, and chaired the HOA board with an iron fist wrapped in a fake smile. Karen Albridge was one such demon. She didn't live in Willow Creek for the community. She lived for control. And the moment the HOA made her chairwoman, the neighborhood shifted. Flags were regulated, grass heights measured, mailboxes inspected, and heaven help the poor soul whose garage door remained open too long. She was the embodiment of tyranny in a pencil skirt, and people feared her. Everyone, that is, except for Grandpa Hank. Hank McAllister had lived in Willow Creek before the subdivision had its name, before there was an HOA or cookie-cutter homes or speed bumps, before Karen and her click-clacking heels ever touched the sidewalk. His land stretched wide, a surviving strip of farmland fenced in by vinyl siding and overinflated mortgages. When the subdivision was built, they'd made him an offer, 7 figures. He laughed in their faces, pulled his John Deere cap low, and went right back to plowing. He lived in the same red farmhouse that he and his late wife Dolores had raised their kids in. The porch was sun-worn and crooked, the yard was a little wild, and in his gravel driveway sat the old Ford pickup, weather-beaten, rust-speckled, and stubborn as hell. Just like Hank. He didn't drive it much anymore, but it wasn't going anywhere. Not if he had anything to say about it. Karen hated that truck. She said it was an eyesore, claimed it was abandoned, cited obscure HOA bylaws that technically didn't even apply to Hank's land. She filed complaints, called code enforcement, left notes in cursive font on pink stationery. Each time, Hank just chuckled, spat into his coffee mug, and stuck her latest letter on his fridge with a magnet shaped like a chicken. But Karen didn't like being ignored. One morning in late April, when the tulips had just started to bloom and the birds were singing louder than usual, Hank's granddaughter Ellie drove up in her Subaru to drop off groceries. She froze halfway up the drive. There was a tow truck idling in front of Hank's house. Karen stood beside it, arms folded, sunglasses perched like twin daggers on her nose. A clipboard dangled from her manicured fingers. The tow driver looked nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, glancing back at Karen like a kid caught between two angry parents. Ellie's heart dropped. She ran from the car, shouting, "Hey, what the hell is going on?" Karen turned slowly, smugness radiating from every fiber of her tennis club outfit. "We're removing abandoned property, dear. It's been sitting there for years, clearly non-operational. We gave Mr. McAllister written notice several times." Hank stepped out onto the porch, dressed in a flannel shirt, suspenders, and boots older than some of the neighborhood's trees. His face was unreadable. "You touch my truck," he said calmly, "and I swear I'll give you something to tow." Karen scoffed. "Mr. McAllister, your time is up. This is a community, not a junkyard." The tow driver hesitated. Sir, maybe we can just—" But before anyone could blink, Hank turned on his heel and disappeared into the barn. It took a few seconds before the noise started, a deep, thunderous rumble that made the ground tremble. The barn doors burst open, and there it was, the tractor. Old Bessie, as she was lovingly called, was massive. A 1968 International Harvester 1206 turbo diesel, repainted red and white with a hand-welded frame and a smokestack that coughed like a dragon waking up from a nap. Karen's jaw dropped. Hank didn't say a word. He drove Bessie straight across the yard and parked her broad, defiant frame directly behind the tow truck, effectively boxing it in. The engine kept running. The tow driver stared, blinking. Karen sputtered, You can't do this! You're obstructing a legal operation!" "Don't see any lawmen, just a clipboard and a snobby attitude." "You'll regret this, old man." "Already do, especially when you talk." Ellie watched in awe.
It was like watching a spaghetti western, but with tractors and HOA bylaws. Karen retreated, fuming, threatening lawsuits and citations as she stopped back to her car. The tow truck, now a hostage in Hank's gravel driveway, wasn't going anywhere until Bessie said so.
That night, news spread across Willow Creek like wildfire. Someone uploaded photos to the neighborhood Facebook group. Hank leaning against his tractor like a war hero, with the caption, "HOA Karen got tractored." The post went viral. Neighbors who had once tiptoed around Karen's wrath now cheered in comment sections. A few even brought over pie to thank Hank for standing up to the tyrant queen. But Karen wasn't done. She never lost. And what came next would prove that this war was only just beginning. 2 days later, a code enforcement officer showed up with a citation, improper storage of farm equipment. Hank laughed again. "Son, this ain't equipment, she's family." Then came another letter. Karen was lobbying the city council to annex Hank's land into the HOA jurisdiction. That way, she could impose every rule in the book, including forced property sales through eminent domain. It was a legal loophole, rarely used, but technically possible. Ellie read the letter aloud on the porch as Hank stared silently at the fields. "She's trying to take everything," Ellie whispered. "She already tried once," Hank said, his voice low. "But she don't know who she's messing with." That night, Hank went into his basement. Ellie followed. It wasn't just dusty old boxes down there. It was a war room. Blueprints, maps of the property, copies of legal documents from the town's founding. Hank had been preparing. He knew Karen wouldn't stop. He said, "She wants a fight? She's gonna get the whole damn revolution." The document was a land deed, signed by the town's founders. Hank's great-grandfather was one of them. The property had certain protections written into the original town charter, little-known clauses that predated the HOA by a century. Clauses that could save the land and destroy Karen's grip on Willow Creek. But Hank needed help, and that meant calling someone he hadn't spoken to in years, his son. Ellie looked surprised when he picked up the phone. "You think he'll come?" she asked. Hank just nodded. "Oh, he'll come." 3 days later, a black pickup with government plates rolled into the driveway. Out stepped a man in a tailored suit, aviator sunglasses, and a military haircut. He looked like a man used to giving orders. Hank stepped off the porch, stared his son in the eyes, and said, "Time to finish what your mama started." The moment Tom McAllister stepped onto the porch, it was like the air thickened. He wasn't just Hank's son. He was a former JAG officer turned land rights attorney with a national reputation for burying corrupt bureaucrats in court filings so deep they had to dig out with a shovel and a prayer. Ellie hadn't seen her father in 5 years. Their reunion was brief, quiet, emotional only in the small glances exchanged between them. But beneath that, a storm was forming. Tom pulled out a leather folder and opened it on the porch swing. "Dad, I read through your town charter. That clause, Article 3, Section 14, it's airtight. No HOA, no local ordinance, no zoning law can override it." Hank nodded. "They tried to buy us out. Your mama made me promise, never sell." Tom's eyes darkened. Karen's about to learn what it means to pick the wrong family. The next few days were a blur of activity. Hank's property transformed into a command post. Ellie scanned and organized documents. Tom filed injunctions, digging into every legal avenue he could find. He filed for a cease and desist against the HOA, requested a historical landmark designation for the farm, and issued subpoenas for HOA financial records. Karen didn't see it coming. At the next HOA meeting, she strutted in with her usual smugness, prepared to gloat over Hank's final warning. The room, usually half full and half interested, was packed wall to wall. News of Hank's resistance had galvanized the neighborhood. Residents who had long been bullied by Karen's policies were now seeing a chance, finally, to push back. Karen stepped up to the podium. "Before we begin," she said, flipping through her clipboard, "I want to inform the board that we have escalated the McAllister property matter to county zoning. A demolition order is being considered for non-compliance." "Point of order," Tom interrupted, stepping forward. "And you are?" "Thomas McAllister, property co-owner and attorney." He handed the nearest board member a thick manila envelope. "These are copies of a pending injunction, 2 cease and desist notices, and a motion for federal review of unlawful annexation procedures." Karen paled. "That's ridiculous. You can't—"
"Oh, I can," Tom said smoothly, "because the farm predates this HOA. And under Municipal Code 11-79, your actions constitute hostile encroachment." The room went silent. Tom leaned in, voice razor-sharp. "Try to tow that truck again, and you'll be dealing with state police and the Department of Agriculture. Oh, and the IRS, because I took a quick look at your HOA financials. You've got some interesting line items there." A few heads turned toward Karen. She looked visibly shaken. "We're not done," Tom continued. "We'll be filing a class action suit on behalf of 22 homeowners who've been wrongfully fined, harassed, and threatened by this board, starting with you." People began to clap. Karen backed away from the podium. "This is a circus. None of this will hold up." "Then I suggest you lawyer up," Tom said, "because the circus just got a ringmaster." The board adjourned early that night. Karen left in silence, her usual entourage trailing behind her, unsure now if she was a leader or a sinking ship. But she wasn't the kind to disappear quietly. 2 nights later, Hank's barn caught fire. It happened just after midnight. Ellie had been up late filing photos of the property for the landmark application. When she heard the crackling pop and saw the glow out her window, she screamed, "Fire! Grandpa! The barn!" Hank was already out of bed, grabbing a hose, but the flames were too strong. Old wood, dry hay, it caught like kindling. The fire department arrived in time to stop it from spreading to the house, but the barn, home to Bessie, the tractor, and over a century of tools and heirlooms, was gone. Hank stood barefoot in the dewy grass, face lit by red siren lights and smoldering ruin. Ellie cried softly beside him. Tom clenched his fists. This wasn't an accident. He was right. The investigators confirmed it the next morning. Arson, accelerants, an unlocked side door, and security footage from a neighbor's ring cam showing a luxury SUV with no plates pulling out of Hank's driveway at 12:17 a.m. Ellie didn't say a word. Tom did. He filed criminal charges the same day. Karen wasn't mentioned by name, but everyone knew. It was the final straw. Residents began pulling their support from her publicly. Anonymous tips flooded in, photos, texts, whispers of HOA funds being used for personal expenses, Karen's backdoor deals with landscaping companies, her threats to residents who didn't comply. By the end of the week, she was under investigation by the state attorney general. And still, Hank stood on the porch, watching the wind blow ash across the yard. "We lost the barn, Grandpa," Ellie said, wiping her face. "What do we do now?" He looked down at her, eyes soft. "We build a new one." And they did. The entire community showed up. Over 20 dozen neighbors, men, women, kids, came with hammers, drills, food, lumber, and stories. The rebuilding of the barn became a symbol, a community retaking its voice. A month later, the new barn stood taller and stronger than the old one, painted fire engine red with "Stand Free" carved over the entrance in iron letters. When Karen received her subpoena, she didn't show up to the first court date, or the second.
Eventually, a warrant was issued for failure to appear. Turns out she'd fled, vacated her home, drained the HOA bank account, and disappeared. Rumors said she'd skipped town, maybe even the country. But she left behind a legacy, one that was now being dismantled. Tom helped rewrite the HOA charter, stripping it of its most oppressive clauses. A new board was elected, by actual vote. Residents now had a voice, and Hank, to no one's surprise, was asked to be the honorary neighborhood advisor. He declined. He said, "I got crops to tend, but if anyone ever tries that foolishness again, I still got Bessie's keys hanging by the door." Ellie ended up staying in Willow Creek. She bought a small place down the road, helped run community events, and took over Dolores's old garden plot, which burst with color by midsummer. As for Hank, he still sat on the porch most mornings, sipping his coffee, the American flag flapping gently in the breeze above him. The old truck, now fully restored by a local mechanic as a thank you, sat proudly in the drive. Not just a truck, a symbol of memory, of resistance, of home. And every time a neighbor passed by and honked, or dropped off a pie, or sat with him for a long chat on the porch swing, he'd nod and tip his cap. Because in the end, the land stayed free. The fight was won. And HOA Karen, she picked the wrong old man to mess with.